Hello and welcome to Premodern BOGELS at Home. The deck list will be at the end of the video, but please do watch the whole thing as it will give you a better idea about how the deck works and it really does help to support the channel. And the deck gets its name from the modern BOGELS list, which uses creatures with hexproof, which unfortunately we don't have. However, cards like Vintara Snapper are the next best thing, as when our lands are tapped, it cannot be the target of spells or abilities, and we can choose when to tap all of our lands, meaning we can absolutely stack it with enchantment after enchantment, making it an absolutely massive beat stick, and then if our opponent targets it, we can just tap all of our lands, which will give it Shroud and fizzle their removal spell. And apart from the Snapper, we're playing a full set of Mother of Runes and Sylvan Safekeeper. Mother is a classic protection creature that taps to give target creature protection from the color of our choice. It's super useful for dodging removal, and Sylvan Safekeeper might actually just be the best card in this deck. It can give a creature Shroud by sacrificing a land, and we can just use this as many times as we have lands in a turn, meaning it is a super headache for opponents to deal with. And we're backing those up with Call of the Herd, which not only has some built-in card advantage with the flashback, but a 3/3 plus some auras can actually smash in for damage very, very quickly in Premodern. And we also have Exalted Angel, which is of course an absolute powerhouse in any creature related matchups. And so moving on to the auras, these are definitely the best three. Briar Shield not only has awesome art, but the +1/+1 really actually does add up and make a difference quite often. And the sacrifice effect doesn't target, meaning it can get around the Shroud effects. Rancor gives +2 and trample for only 1 mana, and when it dies from the battlefield, it will come back to your hand, meaning you can put it on a manland and smash their face. And Armadillo Cloak gives a buff and trample, which is nice, but it also has a pseudo lifelink effect. This is not actually lifelink, meaning it will stack with Exalted Angel, and also meaning you can put it on an opponent's creature, and when they attack you, if you don't die from the hit, you will gain that life back, which effectively nerfs their creature. And the other main ones are Elephant Guide and Ancestral Mask. Elephant Guide is particularly strong, as when the creature dies, you make an elephant, which is really useful as those rancors will go back to your hand. You can pump your elephant and smash their face. Ancestral Mask is arguably the worst one of them all, as it requires other enchantments to give any buff at all. However, I do think this one definitely deserves a consideration for a spot in the 75, as sometimes you play this and it just gives +8/+8 or maybe even more. So I do feel this is decent in those combo matchups where you just need to kill them quickly. And those are the main enchantments, but you might also see Flickering Ward, which is a very good reusable card that gives your creatures protection. The other cards you want, Sylvan Library is excellent against those slow, control or grindy kind of decks. It can give us more card advantage. Swords to Plowshares kind of goes without saying, as does Seal of Cleansing. However, I personally don't play Seal main deck, I play Cursed Scroll, as I really think this deck just loves Cursed Scroll. It does everything we're trying to do. It can put pressure on late game, give us some extra reach, and give us a bit more removal. So I love Cursed Scroll in this deck. The lands are extremely straightforward. We're just playing the green-white lands you'd expect, plus a full set of Treetop Villages, which work excellently with enchantments. However, due to the color requirements of our cards and the relatively low land count, we unfortunately don't have space for any of those sweet utility lands that most decks play. As this is a rogue deck, there are a lot of options. It's still very up in the air. I think Enlightened Tutor is definitely one of the best ones. It allows you to search your deck for an artifact or enchantment and put it on top, meaning you can tutor for any of those auras that you might want. Often Armadillo Cloak is enough to win the game, or any of those specialist cards like Cursed Scroll, Saber's Web, or a Seal of Cleansing. The other options that I really like are Oratog, which works really well with Rancor to make a massive trampling threat, and it also shores up the 2-drop slot. I think Nomad Mythmaker could be quite good in those grindy matchups, as it can return some of those enchantments from our graveyard to the battlefield, while also being a creature that can carry them. And I quite like the idea of one Serra's Sanctum, as sometimes we do just need a little bit of a mana boost. And I have seen builds playing Replenish instead of the Mythmaker, but I personally prefer the Mythmaker because it not only gets stuff back, but it's also a body to carry them, which is something that this deck is a little light on. I've also seen builds playing the creatures with protection from red and black as good things to carry the enchantments. I think if you are going to play those, you're going to go more heavy white, which means it makes sense to play Imperial Armor and shift to that, as that's a great aura. And I definitely think it's possible to play a more traditional Enchantress aggro build, playing things like Seal of Strength and Tethered Griffin, as well as the previously mentioned Oratog, which is very strong in these decks. And moving on to the sideboard, this is still quite open as it's still a very under the radar deck, but I think you definitely want multiple copies of Worship as it's incredible with the Shroud creatures. Armageddon is also an absolute key card against control and combo decks, which is something that this deck is slightly weak on. So I think the majority of the sideboard is going to be for fighting against control and combo. However, as I mentioned, this is still a very under the radar deck and there are just loads of options in these colors. So I really definitely think this sideboard will continue to evolve over time. And ideally, we're looking for starting hands that have a 1-drop creature, some lands and some enchantments. Sylvan Safekeeper is better than Mother of Runes because it can attack and protect itself at the same time. And when playing the deck, it is fairly straightforward. We're just looking to make a creature really, really big and then smash our opponent's face with it. One thing that's really important about this deck is if you try to enchant a creature and then they try to kill it in response, if you give your creature Shroud, then the enchantment will actually fizzle because it's no longer a legal target, meaning it will go to the graveyard. This is also the case with things like Mother of Runes giving protection. If you give your creature protection from green or white, usually white because of Swords to Plowshares, then it means those enchantments will drop off. And I've definitely noticed that opponents tend to shortcut this in their mind and just view the creatures as unkillable and don't even try. So really a lot of the time you get to just do whatever it is you want to do. And it's also important to know this is the case with Vintara Snapper. You need to leave a land untapped. Otherwise, it will get Shroud and the enchantment will fizzle as it's no longer a legal target. So we're kind of always playing one turn behind. And against the deck, there are obviously lots of cards that are good against enchantments, and those are great here too, as are Sweepers, which completely get around our protection. And combo and prison decks can be quite difficult as we don't really have any disruption such as discard or counter magic, meaning they can do whatever it is they want and we're just really trying to race them. And we are definitely an aggro deck, but we're sort of combo-y too as we are trying to assemble some pieces. Our creatures are not really the most aggressive by themselves, and sometimes we can play a bit more defensively, waiting to just build up an enormous creature and just take the game over in 1 or 2 turns. And so the strengths are it's very good in fair matchups, particularly those involving creatures and combat maths. It can be reasonably fast and difficult to interact with, and it can really survive quite well off just 2 or 3 lands. The downsides are it's got very weak disruption and can't really stop combos. It does die to Sweepers, and stacks and prison decks, again due to the lack of disruption, can be difficult. And so this is not the list that I made top 8 with. This is the list that I would play if I was going to enter the tournament again tomorrow. As you can see, I've gone for the Enlightened Tutor package, as I think it just gives a much wider range of options and better sideboard choices, as well as being able to fetch an Armadillo Cloak in those matchups where Armadillo Cloak just completely takes over. And I also built an extremely greedy list, as I don't have a Seal of Cleansing main deck, which I think you could probably put in there. And I do think it's possible that 1 copy of Ancestral Mask could be very good in the sideboard for against those combo matchups. So if you've enjoyed the video, please do like, comment and subscribe. Thank you and see you next time.